Welcome back to the Finding Purpose podcast. My name's Adam. I am your host. 2025 has been a great year. We've had some amazing guests thus far. I really hope you had a chance to dive into the January roster of guests. We had people from just personal development space and Vinnie Brusco to an inspiring thought leader in Alessandra Cortina. And last week, to kick off February, we were able to, or kick off March, to kick off March, we were able to have Carl Michelle, a close friend of mine. Dude's an inspiring dude. Like, he does like great work with the New York school systems, helping kids really find their voice. He's been a mentor to me. I really encourage you guys to listen to that episode and really listen to what Carl's saying, because his message is so powerful. Today, I'm really lucky to have my friend Wanda Andrejecsk here. Did I pronounce it correctly?
Yes.
We had trouble earlier. So, I'm really excited to have this episode. It's really nice to have a powerful female, because this is also coincides with my sister's birthday. Another powerful female who I featured on episode 15. So it made sense to have a powerful female here for her birthday as well. So happy birthday, Amber. Thank you. We are recording this a lot earlier than your birthday. So
happy birthday, Amber.
There we go. But Wanda, thank you so much for coming. Wanda is a young entrepreneur, really inspiring, building a fitness business from the ground up. She's now like in the process of scaling. She is kind of going through those aches and pains that you go through as a young entrepreneur, trying to just learn on the go. We had a really great conversation the other day, and I immediately was like, listen, like, it makes sense for me to have you on the podcast. I want to hear your story, and welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. One of the things that we dove into was your earlier days. And, I remember you shared some insights, but you said you had a lot more to share here today. Let's just jump in. I mean, you are relatively young. So when I talk about early days, it's,
not too long ago.
But I'd love to learn more about, growing up. I know you grew up in Connecticut.
Yeah. So I grew up in Trumbull, about 40 minutes north of here. I grew up in the same house that my dad grew up in. So I ended up in Stanford because I went to college at UConn Stanford. And then after college, we just kind of stayed here.
One of the things you shared early when we were talking is when you were growing up, your parents were immigrants, correct?
So my dad's parents are immigrants.
Okay.
My mom's adopted, so no, she was born here. So not too much of that, but there definitely was hardship growing up too, regardless. My parents neither of them went to like a full 4-year degree for school. So me and my brother are first gen when it comes to getting our bachelor's degrees. Both my parents were nurses, but back then you only needed like a 2-year degree to do nursing school. So it was just like an associate's.
Okay. And what was it like what was it like growing up in that sense in Trumbull, and your parents, you alluded to, like, were kind of like struggling?
Yeah. So it all kind of started because, it all started really with my sister. So when my sister was 2, she was diagnosed with autism and epilepsy. So at that point, my mom had started to stay home from work, because there's just, it's hard taking care of, obviously, a 2-year-old, but also somebody with the limitations that she has.
She's your older sister?
Yeah, she's 2 years older than me. I'm the youngest.
Okay.
So yeah, Amanda has autism and epilepsy. She's not like super high functioning. She's on the level of probably like a 6 or 7-year-old, developmentally. And the epilepsy it's not epilepsy that's like, oh, I just have a seizure once a year or twice a year. She has seizures every single day. And there's, I believe, 7 different types.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, epilepsy is a scary disease. I have someone close to me who, suffers from that. And, knock on the wood, I've really only witnessed one epileptic chapter, and it was scary. And I didn't really know what to do, and I panicked, and, I ended up calling the ambulance. And during that period, it's funny because you go to the hospital and they're basically just hydrate them, and
Yeah, there's not much.
there's not much you can do. You just kind of let it pass. But having to experience that, on a daily basis with the level of epilepsy, the stage of epilepsy that your sister had, what was that like growing up, seeing your parents, really divert a lot of attention to her, and you had a middle brother, and then you?
No, my brother's the oldest.
Your brother's the oldest.
Yeah,
okay.
So I'm the youngest, but I feel like the oldest.
Yeah.
Yeah, for her, it was, I mean, when you grow up, like, witnessing it, it's not like a super big shock, I guess. You kind of get used to it. You kind of desensitize yourself to it. But it was around the time she kind of hit puberty, she started having these epileptic seizures where the postictal state, which is like that after state where they're not fully conscious yet, but they're still kind of coming out of it. They turned into like full-blown psychosis events. So like from the time I was like, I don't know, like middle school to high school, that's when Amanda started having those types of episodes. And those are really scary.
Yeah.
And those are really hard too, because, it's not her doing it and it's not in her control. So like growing up, we were not like told, but like kind of had to like forgive her for all those events. I mean, there was times where it happened when we were driving and she would grab the wheel of my mom's car and like pull us into the side of the road, like she'd grab my mom's hair. Like I'd be in the back seat, like a little 9-year-old Wanda trying to grab my sister from like crashing the car.
Yeah.
And there was plenty of times we had to call the ambulance just for that, because it happens in public. Another time that I like really remember was when it happened at home. But she had basically taken, those like portable DVD players that like back in the day you'd like bring them in the car. They were charged. You put a DVD in, you could watch a movie in the car. We had one of those. Those are really heavy.
Yeah.
And she like chucked it at my mom's head and fractured her skull.
Jesus.
So it's like growing up, seeing all of that, and then also kind of having to forgive her immediately. Like not really being able to harness like anger over it because it's like not her. That was something that I eventually recently over the last couple of years had to just allow myself to get angry about, to actually like feel it and like move on and let go of it.
Yeah, it's funny because like a lot of the conversations that I have is talking about the family, because I think the family unit, especially immediate family, frames who we become.
Absolutely.
After a while. And additionally, we hold on to a lot of events that are traumatic, and we don't really label it as that, especially back in the day, in those moments, it's just, it happened. We move on. This is, you fall into that pattern. Like you said, you're desensitized. Now, after looking back on it, what did you learn about your parents? And, frankly, it was hard for them also.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my mom is a freaking angel. Like she did the very best that she could with what she had. And that's what I'll always say about my childhood, because everyone's doing this life like for the first time. Nobody knows how to handle these things.
Yeah.
Becoming a mom, you don't know how to handle raising a kid. You definitely don't know. You're definitely not prepped to raise somebody with a case as difficult as that. And my mom had to make a lot of really hard decisions. There was a point in time where my sister lived in kind of like a residential setting outside of the house, because it just wasn't safe for my brother and I. So, I mean, I just can't imagine as a mom having to make that choice of like, do I save my other two kids from like not being safe?
Yeah.
Or do I make my special needs kid feel like we're abandoning her? And a lot of these places, the system is really messed up for kids like my sister. It doesn't really support them. So, a lot of those places, they're not treated right. The staff that are taking care of these kids, they have like high school diplomas. They're not educated. The therapists and, some of like the occupational workers and stuff are, but like the main people that are taking care of them every day
to day,
they don't know what a seizure looks like. They don't know what type of seizure it is. They don't know how to de-escalate a situation. There's no real training for these people going into it.
I I was just talking about this with someone where like when you go to the doctor's office or like a dentist, let's say, for example,
Yeah.
like it's a hygienist who takes care of you most of the time. You talk to the dentist for like 20 minutes.
Seconds, yeah.
You know, like, and it happens a lot. Like even when you're in the ER, it's the nurses who are taking care of
Yeah.
you and, you know, putting in the IVs, and then the doctor comes in after their assessment and tells you what that is, which is kind of crazy. But, your mother, obviously, I like what you said where, yeah, she did the best that she could with what she had. What did you learn about yourself?
I think throughout childhood, like I didn't really process much. Like I even think back on it and like I don't remember a ton of my childhood. I've had to really dig deep into that like in recent years because I noticed that there was lots of patterns kind of coming up that had deeper rooted issues like in my childhood. Um, my sister definitely taught me patience,
Mhm.
for sure. Um, and it also, I think, definitely put me in this role of like a caregiver for a really long time. And like, that's kind of where I found like my passion and my purpose
Yeah.
now as well.
So now, like, I like how you said like that kind of planted that caregiving uh, role that you assume in your life, or that you've embraced, and I think that's super important. As you grew up, and obviously you would grow up, go to high school, end up going to school. What are other examples where that early, quote unquote trauma with your sister, where you saw yourself taking on that caregiving role?
That's a good question. Um, Outside of just my sister too, I think it's worth mentioning my dad's state. So when I was 8 years old, my dad had like a massive brainstem stroke and was paralyzed. So it wasn't just taking care of Amanda growing up; it was also taking care of my paralyzed father. Um, so
How old were you?
8,
Okay.
yeah. So he was in the rehab for about like a year post stroke, but his left side of his body is still like pretty much useless. He doesn't walk on his own.
Okay.
So if something would happen with my sister and they were in the psych hospital, my mom had to go see her. There was, okay, who's going to stay home with dad and take him to the bathroom if he has to go to the bathroom and feed him lunch or dinner or whatever. So that was kind of split up between me and my brother.
That's a lot of responsibility to
Yeah,
have.
it's a lot, especially when you're young. So the caregiving role, I mean, it ultimately led into what I do now, with coaching. And, my girls are like everything. Like my assistant coaches clients, like I love every single person in our group. I'll do anything for them. But I think when it comes to just like caregiving in general, like throughout my college years, throughout that, um, I think that kind of spilled over into my friendships, into the relationships that I had outside of that.
Yeah. I really don't want to glaze over what you just said about your dad, because
Yeah,
you're also the youngest daughter,
yeah,
8 years old. Prior to that, I'm sure were you like daddy's little princess, and then
yeah,
watching your hero kind
yeah.
of overnight.
Just fall.
What was that like for you?
It was confusing. I remember the morning it happened. It happened early in the morning. So for backstory, my dad was an operating room nurse. And he worked hard.
Yeah.
He worked like 90 hours a week. The reason it really happened is because he wasn't really on top of taking his blood pressure meds. And he was working so many hours. I mean, I've worked like an 80-hour week. Like I can't imagine in the medical setting too, doing 90 hours where your brain is just always going.
Yeah.
And then also taking care of all of us, when he's home. So that was tough. I mean, I remember the morning it happened. I was young, but at the same time, my mom didn't really sugarcoat anything. My mom didn't say like, "Oh, dad just had to go to the hospital." Like, I saw my dad like with a feeding tube, a trach. Like, I saw him with all of those things shortly after it happened. He was in a coma for about 3 weeks before he woke up. And then after that, like we would visit in the ICU, we would visit like in all the outpatient rehab places that he was at before he came home. I don't know, when you're so young, it's like, I don't think you fully process what happened. But I definitely like once he came home, it just kind of became more real in the sense of like, okay, yeah, like he's really not the same.
Yeah, I mean, like it's a major turning point. It's a major change in your lifestyle, also.
Yeah, I
Where,
mean, it goes from caregiver to now caretaker.
okay, yeah, and it's also just your parents. I think you realize the mortality of your parents, and you realize that at an early age.
Absolutely.
And that's one of the scariest things. Particularly for me. Like I lost my mom when I was 26 at the time, but that was still a rude awakening. When you see that your parents are fallible and that they aren't these objects that or these people that you place on such a high pedestal. And granted, like my relationship with my parents was fraught from, my mid-teens, a little bit after, but it wasn't like I didn't love them. And you know what I mean? Like I love them and I did see them as role models. And then when you see their mortality being tested, a lot of it really becomes real. So when you decide, went off on your own, what was that like knowing that, you're kind of been this caregiver in your home, now you have to leave? Were you a rock in a hard place?
Truthfully, I just wanted to get out.
Okay.
At that point, I was like, I'm ready to be on my own. I'm ready to not have to deal with this anymore. I was just ready to have a break from it. So I went to UConn Stanford. I got a dorm there, even though I would have saved money commuting. But I got a dorm. My mom also was a huge advocate of that. Like my mom was by no means that mom that was like, but we are gonna need you here.
She wanted you to.
Yeah, like she wanted me to. My brother went to UConn Stores. At this point as well, once I started going to school, my sister was placed in a group home setting. So it was really just, it became from my mom having to take care of everybody to now just her having to take care of my dad. So I wasn't as, I was ready to go.
Yeah.
I definitely missed home. Like I visited a lot, especially first year. I would just take the train back to Trumbull.
Yeah. Where do you take the train? Fairfield Metro and you drive up?
Yeah, or Stratford.
Stratford?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Stratford.
Okay.
At that point, my parents moved to Shelton too, so it was like right there. But yeah, when I left for school, like it was, I think the first time where I was just able to breathe and like worry about myself.
A little relief.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
and I think that's awesome. Because I've seen a lot of people in those situations not chase their own dreams because they felt that the guilt of leaving. And sometimes, I get it. Yeah. You're human and feeling guilt, but at the end of the day, I'm sure your dad wouldn't want you to. No.
No, of course not.
So I don't know, that's a lot. That's some heavy things that you just dropped, and I kind of even don't really know where to go from here. But so you go to UConn Stanford and you see your dad, I feel like it's almost impossible not to connect, your dad and your sister to why you chose to pursue the career 100%. That you did. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, the original plan was nursing.
Yeah.
Growing up, I grew up in hospitals. Like my sister was constantly in and out of the psych hospital because if one of those psychotic postictal states happened in person, or in public, we would automatically have to take her to the hospital. Because what do you say? Oh, my sister, this is just how she is. She loses it sometimes. And then throughout my dad's thing, like I just always felt like I belonged in a hospital in a weird way. And I felt like, no, but like, it just felt like I need to now give back in the same way that these people, these nurses have given to my family. Cause we had a lot of great people taking care of my sister and dad throughout the years. Mm-hmm. So it just felt natural. I was like really into like House too, that show, House MD. So I was like, I want to be like House. It was funny. But COVID kind of ruined that dream because I got my bachelor's in biology. Last year was on like completely online. And then I was going to go to do like a 12-month accelerated nursing program. But at that point I was already $20,000 in the hole. Yeah. And to do that program, it would have been more money that I had to take out. I would have figured out where I have to live, right? Like, I'm not going to move back in with my parents after being gone for 4 years. So it was tough in that sense. So thankfully, COVID kind of opened up my eyes and was like, try something else. So I continued bartending. I continued waitressing just to pay the bills, just to be able to get an apartment and stuff. And then I ended up in coaching.
Yeah.
So that kind of started because post-COVID, online coaching kind of blew up because, everyone's doing Zoom workouts when the world was shut down.
Yeah, or they could buy a Peloton.
Yeah, or they're buying a Peloton. So I worked with an online coach because I had been working out since I was like 15, 16. One of my friends' older brothers in high school taught me how to like basically power lift. He taught me how to squat, how to deadlift, how to bench, all of the basics. And I fell in love with it. Part of it was I just really hated how I looked. Like, I just really was insecure. I really wanted to like have a six pack. Like, I was not comfortable in my body at all. And I also had zero knowledge on nutrition. So I ended up working with an online coach, and that's who taught me how to like track your macros, how to fit a cookie into your diet without gaining 20 pounds, how to eat pasta without, gaining fat. And it was really eye-opening, and it changed my relationship with food like so quickly. And that is ultimately what made me want to go into coaching. Like, my first fitness coach was like my rock through a lot of college. And I went from being super scared of carbs to realizing carbs are actually what's going to help you make progress. And just like learning how to eat. And I just had freedom within my diet for the first time. So I was like, this is so freaking cool. Like, I want to help other women do this too. So that's how fitness coaching really started for me. Originally, I thought maybe I'd work for another fitness coach, and then ended up getting connected with my first mentor, Zach. And he sold me a course on basically like how to start your business from the ground up. And now here we are.
I love that. I mean, you covered a lot of ground there, and I want to talk about, you said you didn't really like how you looked, and, you spent all this time, during your teens and taking care of others. Yeah. And now it was your time to focus on Wanda.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that healing process, because not only are you going through that physical transformation, you're also unpacking a lot now that you're removed from the situation that you were in with your family. And I don't want to make that sound dark. It's just that like you were in this role in your family. Yeah. Now you're on your own, and you have a chance to pour into Wanda, not only on the physical side, but also on the really unpack that. Talk about that journey of healing.
Yeah. So honestly, I distracted myself from it for a really long time. And when I was writing out some of the answers to the questions that you gave us to kind of prep before this, it really kind of came through to me that like college, I didn't look at myself in that way. I didn't start that healing journey until post-college. Because it was just, college was a distraction. You go to class, you have to study, you're worrying about yourself. Like, I was working out, but like I wasn't like taking care of myself mentally. Yeah. I was working 40, 50 hours a week. I was going to class. Biology degree is like a lot of work. And I didn't really start looking into that until honestly probably after I left waitressing and I went full time with my business. So that kind of started because when I left waitressing and bartending, I left a community that I had, right? Like, all of my people in that restaurant, like, those were my closest friends. We all had the same days off, so we'd spend our days off together. That was like the community that I had inside of Stanford. Yeah. And leaving that is tough because you have to. I know you mentioned you've worked in restaurants before. Oh, yeah. Super, super, like, toxic. I still work in one a couple nights a week. It's great, yeah. It's the one that I was in, it was toxic in the sense of, like, we were just being overworked. Like, there was a time before I started coaching, I worked one summer. I would work 40 hours in 3 days, Friday through Sunday, and then have to work Monday night.
Was it like a making up for lost time kind of thing where you're just like pedal to the metal?
Kind of. I think a lot of it was out of necessity in the sense that like I was paying rent for the first time. I was trying to throw money into this business that I'm opening up. Like the course that I paid for was like $5,000. I think a lot of it comes from in my earlier days, just like financial literacy too. Like it's not like that was really taught.
Yeah.
So I kind of had terrible spending habits. So I felt like I was always broke, even though I was making a good amount of money.
Yeah.
And also I just think it was because that environment, that chaos, being in overdrive all the time, like one after another, like it put me in a place where I didn't have to think about all the shit that happened when I was younger.
Yeah.
I didn't have to think about that. I had to go to work. I had to go do this. I had to go do that. And I think that's what college through before I went full time with my business really was. Like it was just, I was so busy and I was so used to that chaos that it like felt natural. It didn't feel wrong.
Yeah. It's funny because, I think a lot of people do that where it's like, all right, I don't really want to unpack this right now. So I'm going to pour myself into something else to kind of distract me. And granted, it was a necessity because obviously the finances and being on your own, but, coming to the realization that you also were blocking off having to do the work until, you were ready is a huge admission. And so when the time came that you actually had to face it and start unpacking, I don't really think a time comes when you actually face it. It's just like, I'm ready to.
Yeah.
What was that moment like? What was that process like? And what do you still struggle with now that you need to kind of detach yourself from certain habits or certain kind of impulses? Because, I know for me, my growing up, I had trust issues, and growing up, I was easily triggered by narcissistic behavior, or I was sometimes had a short fuse, and now it's kind of like that reactionary impulse that I always have. Now I do the best to kind of take a couple of breaths and sit there and really process and understand what I can control, what I can't. And I think that's much better for me. And it's something I practice because, for so long I was reactive. And and that's the thing. This healing is practicing these better habits and pausing. Yeah. So what for you, do you consciously have to make efforts to practice to facilitate that healing journey?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So when I started healing, quote unquote, right? I started looking at all my shit and trying to run through it. It really started because I'd gone full time with the business. I had all of this time now, and I had to think more. I had time to think, right? And honestly, after I left the restaurant, it was a really lonely time for me. Entrepreneurship is, especially as like a solo entrepreneur, like it's just you doing it. It's really, really lonely. Yeah. I'm working from home, right? I've got my cats. I ended up getting a second cat.
You and Chris and your cats.
Yeah. But it was a really lonely time, and I felt like I still had like my best friends, but like it's not like you're seeing them all the time. Not really getting any human connection except for when I go to the gym.
Yeah.
Right? Like it was a time to really, really think. And I honestly fell into like a really just like dark time, depression, anxiety, whatever you want to call it. And I ended up getting connected with what really started it all is I ended up getting connected with a girl who does it was like a mindset mentorship. So it was like mindset coaching, right? Because I realized like, I don't even want to get out of bed in the morning. Like there's got to be something wrong with me. But the last thing I wanted to do is like go to the doctor, tell them that and get put on like an SSRI. Like I knew there was just things that I had to process. So I started working with her. I did this 12-week program. I spent like $500 on it. I literally took out a loan for it, but I was like, this is going to change a lot. And their specialty was like coaching coaches. They were mindset mentors for coaches. So at first I looked at it as like, oh, this is like a cool thing that I'll learn and I'll be able to implement into my clients. And then it ended up being like, okay, no, we're going to fix you. And that was when I first started my first like practice that I stuck with for a long time to kind of just like process was journaling, right? Just like therapizing yourself through like writing out your feelings. And so it was a 12-week program. Every week we'd get on a Zoom and we would talk for an hour about what came up. And then she'd give you like journal prompts based on what else is coming up. And it all started with the first journal prompt she gave me was like, write 3 positive and negative traits about your mom, your dad, and like your closest friend. And that is what started everything, because that's what brought up like the anger, but also like gratitude at the same time, because I'm writing the positives, like, okay, what does my mom have that I also have? But that's what brought up like, holy shit, like I need to like sort through this. And it was tough because my mom's my best friend at the same time. So like processing that and not really being able to like talk. I mean, I talked to her about it, but I just quickly figured out that you probably shouldn't talk about your trauma with the person that
may have had a role in it.
Yeah, exactly. Not that she traumatized me, but like my childhood definitely, there was stuff to work through.
There was stuff to work through, of course, yeah.
And so that was tough too, because I couldn't even go and talk to her about it. I don't have a very close relationship with my brother either. So, it was kind of just from there, working through all of that. I developed that practice of journaling. After that program ended, I would just journal in the morning, like a reflection of my day. I'd write affirmations, gratitudes, like really just start focusing on the good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like super important when it comes to just kind of facing everything. And I've understood that a lot of the negative emotion that I had, or the trauma, was rooted in fear, and one good acronym for fear, it's either fuck everything and run or face everything and recover.
Yeah.
And, when you look at those the two opposite ends of the coin, I got to a point where it was, I had to face everything and really unpack it and really dig inside of myself. And, as you're working with this coach, thinking that you're going to use it to learn and be able to package and help your clients, that's a really, really pivotal turning point where you're like, no, like I need to pour myself into this work because I won't be effective in what I'm doing. You also said something really powerful about entrepreneurship and starting off and it being really lonely. And I say that to people all the time. Growth is lonely. Yeah. Those early days of planting seeds is really, really, really lonely. Yeah. And it's also that time where you see who's really there for you. You see who really wants to help you. You also see what relationships are toxic, and at the end of the day, kind of if they fall, they fall. That's fine. Yeah. And you also got to be willing to let go of them. And like that was something for me that I came to that realization, in the beginning of my journey, where I was so worried that I would have to like break up with people. Yeah. You know what I mean? But like, hey, like you're no longer serving me. But as I embarked on a separate journey that wasn't really tied to them, it just organically deteriorated. Yeah. And, I did have that sense of loneliness, but I also had that sense of freedom where it's like, you know what? Like, I don't really need to water this relationship anymore because like it seems like they don't want to either. And at the end of the day, we're kind of just going off in different directions. Yeah. No hard feelings, whatever. Exactly. So, I kind of want to talk to you about, what you do with your clients and how you empower them and how do you just unpacked your entire, experience. Mm-hmm. I do actually want to talk about your brother for a second. Was he, because like your brother kind of may remind me of my sister in a sense, did he just like kind of pretend that like nothing was wrong and just like go on with his life? Or was it just like, yeah. And I feel like that's so common, you know, where it's like one person kind of pours himself into, you know, and then the other person kind of is just like, no, like, I'm just going to live my life.
Yeah.
And are you resentful towards him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
When I started doing all this work, I had called him and was like, dude, I need somebody to like talk to about this. Like, we need to like re-strengthen like our relationship, and nothing really ever came out of it. Yeah, he's definitely just, I think, bypassed it and just like built his own life. He just had a kid. He got married. I haven't seen him in a year.
Yeah. No, I hear you. And you know what? The one thing that as you work on your own self is understanding that he's hurt also. Yeah. And that's how he reacts.
And that's what I think frustrates me the most.
Yeah.
Is because I'm like, you don't have to be so hurt. Like, if you just look at it and like process it, like you'll be able to let go of it. You know, instead of just not looking at it, subconsciously harnessing it in you, right? There's definitely like pent up anger, all the things that I experienced, he experienced too. And that's, I think, what upsets me the most about it is like, I'd rather, it's hard work to do, but like, it would be so much better if you just did it and moved past it. And then we could all just be like happy together. Yeah. in a sense.
I mean, I think it's a testament to how people react to the same situation differently.
Yeah.
And I think when we understand that the way they're reacting is how they react, and that's a reaction. And, you know, for me, it took a long time where I wanted to bring people in and they were almost resistant. And it's like, listen, like, I have to just accept that's who they are. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I can serve them to get ahead in my healing journey. So when and if the time comes where they need it, I can support them. Yeah. And that's kind of like where I had to be when it came to a lot of people, in the sense that I can't force you to do something that you're not ready to do yet. Yeah. And I can control what I can control, and I can control me. Yeah. So now as you work with clients and, you know, they're in a place where you were once when you started your fitness journey and your healing journey, where you said you didn't feel good about the way you looked. You worked on the way you felt. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you see that a lot with your clients in the early onset.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you use your lived experience to help your clients?
So it's interesting. When I started coaching, I noticed that there were some clients that would just come in and crush it. And then there was other clients that would come in and just struggle with the most basic things, right? And I started thinking, even in just like my first year, I was like, why is it, one of my clients, Jay, she was one of my first clients, I was like, why is it that Jay can just come in here and crush it, and the next person's coming in here doing this similar things and just like really, really struggling with the follow through of it? Yeah. And I realized that it was really based on like their perspective, their mindset, and like how they really go through life in that sense. So when it comes to that, we've worked a lot on mindset. We do a group call once a week. And most of those group calls are going through mindset work. We've done like guided meditations together. I've done lectures on like, this is what self-sabotage looks like. This is how we work through body image issues. This is how we work through self-image issues. And really, I've just kind of created like lecture styles where I teach them like, this might be coming up for you. This is what it's rooted in. Yeah. Right. And just bringing the awareness to it, because that's the first step, right, to changing anything.
Just knowing what you have to work on.
Exactly. Yeah. Having to have the awareness around like why it's happening in the first place.
Yeah. And also just kind of understanding that it's a process.
Yeah. Like last night we had our group call and we were talking about procrastination, because something we see a lot in clients is they'll push all of their workouts to the end of the week, and then they got to work out Thursday through Sunday, and then they don't get all their workouts in. Or they're tracking their macros and they'll wait until the end of the day to put it all in, and they'll be like, holy, I got 100 carbs left to eat. No one wants to eat 100 carbs at 9 p.m. Yeah. It's like 4 bowls of pasta. So it's this procrastination that shows up and it affects their daily life. But what I believe procrastination is really rooted in is that fear of failure. Because if you fear failure and you don't look at it as something like that, it's a learning lesson, right?
Yeah.
Then you're always going to kind of run away from it. And what happens with that? You procrastinate on things. You push things off, and then you end up not getting them done.
I like that. And I mean, I have been known to procrastinate from time to time. And, nothing is worse than when you put something off that needs to be done, especially if it's just literally like one phone call or just, like inputting your macros in, real time. And there's really like no excuse. Like, I love that like spin on procrastination, because I think that's dead on.
Yeah.
Where, damn.
Same with setting goals, right? A lot of people won't set goals for themselves, or they'll set goals in their head. They won't write them down. They won't put a timeline to it, or they will set a goal that's like super realistic, right? Super attainable.
They're not challenging themselves.
They're not challenging themselves. It's because you're. What happens if you set the goal and you don't hit it?
Yeah.
Then you fail. A lot of the time, failure for most of us is associated with some type of event that happened in our life that made us feel really bad about ourselves. Right?
Yeah. Huh. So like, how do you hold them accountable?
So we did this year. We started in January. Jenna and I both got on a call with every single one of our clients. We got on like 45 minutes, an hour Zoom calls, and we mapped out every single month of the year. So what we're doing in January, what we're doing in February, what we're doing in March, what are the 3 goals we want to hit in that? What are we going to do then? And we literally made them like map out the entire year together. And then every 6 weeks we get on a call with them. So around this time, we'll be getting on calls from everyone from January. And we're going to say, okay, what did we hit? What do we need to push to next month? It's a rough timeline, but it's there so that you can't just come in here and say you want to lose 10 pounds and it's 9 months later and you haven't lost 10 pounds. Yeah. Right. So we break it down into smaller, like monthly goals, but then we have the whole picture of what we're looking at.
Are you ever like, hey, listen, like I saw your Instagram story. I saw that burrito bowl and those 4 shots of tequila.
I reply to my clients' Instagram stories all the time.
Really?
Normally though, it's like, just track it. Just put it in put it in my
Stop
fitness
taking pictures of food and track it.
I'm like, just track it. Like, I don't care if you have 3 margaritas, just track it so you can look at how many calories you just drank.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's good. I mean, I think like offering programs like that virtually are great, but it requires a lot of mutual trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I want to talk about, trust when it comes to building a business, but also maintaining and retaining clients. Mm-hmm. I think that's like obviously a key pillar.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, retention's key for sure. I have clients with me that have been with me since 2022, and they've seen the program go from Workout with Wanda to Be Reborn. They've seen me go from being completely alone in it to bringing Jenna in and having to hire and train a team member and integrate her into it. What was the question?
Trust.
Building that trust within myself or with clients as well?
Well, the role mutual trust plays in not only generating results, but also generating a long-standing relationship.
Yeah. So how do I build that trust?
Well, just talk about the significance of it and how do you build it, especially with a new person who doesn't even trust themselves. So if someone can't trust themselves, they might meet you and say, hey, I'm looking at her Instagram. She's got the results, blah, blah, blah. But they don't even trust themselves.
Yeah.
How do you help them build that internal trust in themselves?
Yeah, that's a good question. We take things really slow. Like, we are not a quick fix. You're going to come in here and lose the weight in 3 months. Like, we're going to literally work on you just following through with and getting consistent with the things that build the foundation for where you want to go. So I think in the beginning, it really just comes down to setting more realistic, more attainable goals so that they can prove to themselves that they can say that they want to do something and actually do it.
Yeah.
So that it can be as simple as like drink 60 ounces of water today, get 5,000 steps today. Like and even when it comes to like the nutrition program part, I have everyone track their food for a week, the first week that they come in, and then I give them a goal that's similar to what they're already doing. Because you're right, you have to make the client believe and trust in themselves before you try to give them something that they're not already doing.
You know, it's funny. Like, I kind of want to pivot now because I'm a huge fan of your boyfriend, Chris. Like, I fucking love Chris Bukel. He's one of my favorite people that I was lucky to meet over the past couple of years, and just watching him do what he does is just like super. It's awesome seeing him just grow over the past 2 years the way he has. You know, you guys have been together since freshman year of college, correct? Yeah. And, you know, he plays a huge role in your life. And the fact that you guys both are in the same career. Yeah. What has it been like sharing this journey with someone? And how do you guys kind of feed each other's best impulses other than him locking the door for the, you know, AC guy, the plumber?
Yeah, it's interesting being in the same career path, especially because we don't always have the same philosophies on things.
Yeah.
Like for example, he's a big fan of Ozempic. I am not. Like there are things that we have different views on.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he thinks it's gonna change the world, solve obesity. I like think it's gonna give people cancer, but it's fine.
Yeah. Hot take.
Hot take. Yeah, it's been interesting building this alongside him because his work is all in person.
Yeah.
So, you know, he's not home a lot of the time. And I think that was tough too, especially with me going full time and being home all day versus him being gone all day. Because he started Equinox the same time around when I started going full time and not waitressing anymore. So it was, I think, tough in the beginning, just still navigating the responsibility, also with my propensity to be like that caretaker, where I'm like taking care of everything in the house and also trying to take care of the like build a business.
Yeah.
That was tough in the beginning, but we've worked that out over the years with the just like he now is pretty. I mean, he's very helpful around like house stuff.
Yeah, that's good. You know, it's funny because I kind of had a similar situation where like, you know, I was gone and my partner was home working from home, and it almost I can understand how I was gone and it was, and she felt like I wasn't doing enough at home because I can totally understand that, especially talking to folks who've experienced the same thing. But, you know, that's something that I actively work on. You know, I'm not gonna lie, I'm terrible, you know, when it comes to like doing things around the house. But, you know, at the end of the day, like, you know, when we support each other to the best of our ability emotionally, you know. And I want to talk about, you know, like how your journey over the past 6 years and, you know, in that partnership, how has being in a relationship helped support your healing journey? Or was it important to kind of draw lines and be like, this is me and this is you. Let's have these independent goals and then grow together collectively?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I started like my healing journey with things, there was a lot of stuff that I had that came up in the relationship that I had to heal. Like, for example, you said earlier that a lot of your stuff was rooted in fear. A lot of my stuff was rooted in needing control, right? So like needing control over the smallest things, right? Like, and going along with the reactiveness that you were talking about before, I was super reactive for a really long time.
Yeah.
My mom did everything that she could, but she yelled a lot. And she apologizes to me to this day about how much she yelled at us. But that was also her just grasping for control.
Yeah.
And it started coming up in our relationship that when we would argue over something, like I would yell. I wouldn't even know I was yelling. And then afterwards, like he would kind of shut down. I would be screaming. and then it was super unproductive.
Yeah.
So it came into a point where I kind of realized that and was like, oh my God, I really need to work on that, because being yelled at by anybody, like, you're not going to want to have the conversation, and then nothing's going to get done. So I actually had him tell me when I was yelling, which,
Like, hey, you're yelling.
yeah, like I told him, I was like, just come up to me, like put your hand on my shoulder and just be like, Wanda, like, you're screaming right now.
Yeah.
And that's one example of how me going through that healing and like how he supported me through that.
Well, I think it's rooted in your early years when you literally had no control over anything.
Yeah.
You had no control over your sister. You had no control over your dad. And now you're in an environment by yourself, and you want to have some sort of just control over the situations. That's such a cool, like, all right, it's not cool. All right. But like, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of cool how you can make that connection.
Yeah.
Now, you know, that you've identified that, like, you know, control is something you really needed. What do you do to control yourself? Because I think that's the only thing that you really can't control.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you kind of said earlier, the only thing that you can control is like how you react to things. You can't really control how other people react to certain things. You can't, like, you really can just control how you feel.
Yeah.
And I think that comes back down to just like taking care of myself mentally. Journaling is something that kind of started the healing journey for me. Now what I'm really into is breath work. Have you ever done a breath work session?
I have done a couple.
Like the ones with the headphones on, playlists, like you're full on hyperventilating yourself?
No.
Okay. So
I thought I knew what I was talking about.
There's something called breath work, and we're actually looking to bring a girl into our container, because we've had
a breathwork specialist?
some of our clients do it. Yeah. Basically you like listen to, it's usually really powerful music. Sometimes it's like a little not gospel-y. Like sometimes it's a little like God music. I don't know how to explain that. Sometimes it's like dubstep, sometimes it's just beats, but you go through and you do this. It's really like an active form of meditation.
Okay.
That's like the best way to describe it.
I do meditate.
Yeah, it's like a more active form of meditation. So you're going through different breath patterns. It's really, really deep breathing through the mouth. So it almost feels like you're hyperventilating.
I want to do breath work right now.
Yeah, we can definitely do it. But it's like a somatic release. Like journaling is like, okay, great. You're just like writing down your feelings. This is like, okay, whatever emotions are kind of like trapped up inside you, like you're able to like physically breathe them out.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, I love breath work. Absolutely love it. It honestly, like, it came to me when 2 year ago, I lost one of my friends to suicide, which was really tough. And I had never experienced grief. I hadn't lost anyone in my family or anything. And I did not know how to handle that.
Yeah.
As healed as I was, that rocked me. I did not know how to handle it at all. And one of my mentors was like, I think you need to do breath work and like, just like breathe it all out. And like it literally, after a couple sessions, I was like, oh my God, I can like finally function again.
That's wild. Yeah. I mean, I never thought about using breath work for grief, but I mean, you know, like I myself I do the meditation, I do the journaling. I got to look into breath work. I'm sorry. I don't have much to add on breath work.
It's okay.
But that's super powerful. I want to jump in and talk a little bit about purpose. Obviously this is the theme. Do you feel like you have found a purpose in what you do?
Absolutely, yeah. I feel like I lacked it for a little while in that period between going away from taking care of my family to now taking care of myself and bartending and waitressing. And then I really found a lot of my purpose through what I've created now, which is the coolest part about building your own business too, is like you can build it into whatever you want.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, I definitely feel like I've found that through coaching and through building it.
What daily habits do you incorporate in order for you to stay grounded in your purpose?
That's a good question. one of them is obviously working out,
Yeah.
right? Like just taking care of my physical being. Breathwork is another thing. I wouldn't say it's daily, more like weekly. Um, Outside of that, I feel like it's just like taking time for like yourself, like taking time to like continue having those conversations with yourself.
Yeah, just like self-care.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, I love that. And what does like the word purpose mean to you?
So it's interesting. I was thinking about this last night, and I feel like a lot of the times you think about purpose and you immediately go to like what you do for your career, right? Like your purpose is you are a coach. But I think it's so much more than that too. Like before I'm a coach and a business owner, like I'm a daughter, I'm a partner, I'm a sister, I'm a friend. Um, and I mean, I think a culmination of all of those things is really just makes up like what I'm here for.
Yeah. No, I love that. And it's so true. You know, oftentimes like people who are listening to this podcast are kind of in this weird place. So what advice would you give to someone who's on that journey of finding purpose?
Yeah, I was thinking about this last night too. You got to find what your passion is. You know, a lot of people say don't mix like your passion with work.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's completely like not the way. Like, I think you got to find out what you're passionate about and find a way to monetize it. So, like for me, I was passionate about the gym. I was passionate about fitness, and I built a business around that. If it's art, if it's whatever it is, you know, you got to just figure out what it is that you actually really enjoy doing every day and find a way to make money off of it.
I love that. I love that because that's so accurate. You know, you cross your passion into just curiosity and the ability to you find a way to monetize it. Like you're going to be living a great life. I really want to thank you for being here today.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think this was like, it was really cool because I think you're the youngest person I've had on this podcast and just kind of hearing your journey and hearing wisdom, you know, in someone as young as you and in this stage of your business where you're like ready to scale at such like an early period where a lot of folks are trying to do what you're doing. I really do tip my hat to you. And if you can, please let my audience know what you're working on and how they can reach you.
Yeah, absolutely. So to reach me, everything's through Instagram. I literally don't even have a business card. Everything's through Instagram. I'll have Adam tag it because my last name's long. But what we're doing at Be Reborn is we're really just trying to like end the war on women that's been dealt through the diet culture that we've all been surrounded with. So if you've been struggling with your eating habits, you've been struggling with feeling confident in your body, just like having good body image and loving what you look like in every single phase, like that's what we do. So
I love that.
Happy to have you.
I love that. And Be Reborn. I just want everybody who listened to this episode, please feel free to subscribe, obviously, leave a comments, and I'm super grateful for your viewership. Thank you so much, Wanda. And super grateful to have you and to grow on this friendship as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.